Hello everyone, welcome back to another ramble, review, discussion sort of thing about Doctor Who Season 2, Episode 2, Series 15, Episode 2, whichever you prefer, Lux by Russell T Davies. And yeah, I had a good time talking about the Robot Revolution last week, so I thought I'd jump back in and talk about this episode, because I thought this episode was great. Definitely a step up from last week, even though I did enjoy last week's as well. I think it's one of the best episodes of this era, of RTD2. And the first half of it, I was like, we're so back. We're so back. It's so good. This is amazing. This is everything I've wanted. Finally, a Doctor Who episode. I wrote this. This is a note I wrote about halfway through. Finally feels like an episode of Doctor Who, not trying to be anything more. I was like, finally, just give us a Doctor Who episode that's not trying to be, self-referential and clever and, oh, look how great we are. It was the best. We're amazing. Then that scene happens. You probably know the one if you've seen the episode. Spoilers for the episode. And I was like, it was going so well. But still, I thought this episode was really good. Like, this close to being a banger. I'd probably still give it like a solid, 4 Mr. Ring-a-dings out of 5, So, it was still great. But it's just I can't think of a better word than smugness. I feel like there is a bit of smugness to some of this era that just rubs me the wrong way, and I just am not as into. And that just crept in at the halfway point. I was like, that's a shame. And then I talked myself around that scene. I'll talk about it obviously in more detail a bit later on. I was like, okay, well, I can see what they're doing with that, and plot-wise it would make sense for Mr. Ring-a-Ding to do this, to try and trap them, blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, fine. That scene was way too long for what it needed to be, and too melodramatic for what it needed to be, but fine, cool. And then, right at the end, they bring those characters from that scene back into it. I'm like, you've killed it now. You've killed it again. You didn't need to do that. Oh my god. But, it is what it is, so it was a shame, and I have come away feeling a little bit sad, because I thought this was going to be my favourite episode in years, and I was like, this is going to be the best episode of this era by far. It's so, so good. And then, for me, at least, for my personal taste, kind of killed it a bit. But it was still great. Lots of good to talk about, mostly good, to be honest. Because, the first half of this episode, I don't think I changed a thing. I was loving it. So, yeah, let's just dive in deeper, I guess. I think the setting, 1952, and the cinema setting and everything was really good, really effective, really evocative of the time period. The set design and the costumes and everything, Doctor Who's always been very good, I think, at showing, this is this point in history. I feel like they've always been very, very good at that. And this is no exception with this episode. That kind of pre-title sequence was so good. So unnerving when Mr. Ring-a-Ding just has that heel turn, and you're like, oh shit, and then he crawls out. As soon as, this was, by the way, my most anticipated episode of this season. As soon as I found out this was the one that was going to have the cartoon character in it. Because from that first time we saw Mr. Ring-a-Ding in the trailer, because it's that bit where he's crawling out of the screen, I was like, yes, that's amazing. And I know a lot of people did assume that he was going to be a god of light or something like that, which obviously turned out to be the case. I think a lot of people would have known that as well, myself included, that something about the Pantheon of Gods was going on in this episode, just because of set images that came out that showed the Harbinger reveal on the cinema. That was, people saw that on set images and stuff, so we kind of assumed that, okay, there's going to be a god in this episode. And it's interesting to have a god appear in episode 2 of these first 2 series so far, and if obviously we get more Doctor Who, which is kind of up in the air at the minute, if that pattern would continue. So yeah, the setting and everything was great. I loved the opening sequence. Mr. Ring-a-Ding, I think, is an icon of this era. Alan Cumming, as soon as they announced Alan Cumming was coming back to the show and voicing a character, I was like, yes, please, thank you, sir, to you. I love Alan Cumming in The Witchfinders. I think it's one of my favourite guest performances in Doctor Who. I think about it all the time. I quote it all the time. So to get him back for a voice role, was fantastic, and I thought he absolutely killed it. He was amazing as Mr. Ring-a-Ding. The animation of him and everything, just, you know, his design is so good and so true to like that time period, and like he just looks like a character in like Cuphead, which is one of my favorite video games. They evoked that slice of time so brilliantly with his design, and you know, just seeing him kind of come through. What is it with like Russell T Davies and spoons? Like they had to use a spoon to like save the universe at the end of last season, and now spoons they're betraying the human race this time and screwing all over by allowing this god of light into the projector. So you know, that's unfortunate for spoons. I loved Mr. Ring-a-Ding as an antagonist, or I suppose I should just call him Lux. No relation to obviously Lux from series 4. I was a bit scared that they were going to go there, and like, because you know the 60th specials were kind of, wasn't series 4 great, aren't we the best? So I thought, oh no, we're not carrying on with that, are we? But it's kind of just a separate thing. You know, Russell does like reusing names a lot. You know, I think there's a Vivian Rook, is obviously, she was in series 3, the finale with the Master. She was in The Sound of Drums, and he has another show where there's a character called Vivian Rook, I believe. And then, you know, we have Yanto Jones and Martha Jones, and Mickey Smith came from Sarah Jane Smith. You know, Rani Chandra and now Belinda Chandra. So I think it's just that kind of thing. If you like a name, the name's good, you might as well just keep using it. But yeah, just the setting and everything was great for this. I think the development of the Doctor and Belinda's relationship was good. I'm hoping there's still maybe a bit of tension later on down the line. I'm kind of sad that it's already just like the tension that was interesting at the end of episode 1 seems to have dissipated. I get if they don't revisit it, because, you know, they kind of had the Doctor a bit reluctant to open up about Gallifrey at the start, and then they do open up about that. And, you know, this is very much, I think, an episode of Belinda understanding the Doctor's point of view a bit more, and understanding his character, where he's coming from, and giving themselves depth to get out of their predicament when they became, like, the animated people, which I thought was a really clever way of getting them out of that predicament, and then, like, physically, like, holding the, like, frame that they're trapped in to, like, set it alight and escape that way. That was really clever. I really enjoyed that. The only thing at the start that was a bit like, was when they put the clothes on, they get changed, because it's just beat for beat the Devil's Chord. It's like exactly the same sequence, really, and it's even filmed in exactly the same way, and like, I wish something different could have been done with that. I didn't know if they were going to really properly delve into, like, it's the 1950s, you know, we have 2 people of colour here, are they going to address that? And they did. You know, it's not like the focal point of the story, that's not what the story's about. You know, that's what stories like Rosa can tackle head on, but I'm glad they did address it. And I see it in the diner when they like walk in, and you know, the mother of one of the boys who went missing at the start, you know, she's kind of telling the waiter to like, I'll break the rules so that, you know, they can talk to me about their son, because it's obviously a segregated diner. So I liked seeing people that weren't arseholes and weren't racist, so that was good. And you know, they then, obviously it turns out not to be real, and thank God. But they did have that bit a bit later on where they, you know, there seems to be a lot of racism going on, but that was just, you know, one of Mr. Ring-a-Ding's tricks to try and trap them. And I thought that was a clever thing that the Doctor realised, like, this costume's inaccurate, this isn't real. That was a nice way of him realising what the hell's going on. The music, I feel like there was a lot of reused music in this one. I kind of wish it had a bit more of its own voice in that sense. I think they used Amy's theme a couple of times, which was interesting. I think that was maybe that's purposeful, because that was, I think, the scene with the Doctor Who fans. So maybe, you know, just reusing all those previous bits of music in that scene just makes sense, because it's kind of, you know, it was the show just, you know, sucking itself off, basically. I loved the scene in the diner when they're talking to this mother of the missing boy. I think moments like that, character moments like that, have been sorely lacking from this era. And, you know, it was just allowing the Doctor to be the Doctor, you know, not the Doctor who's, you know, shutting down a hospital and killing patients on life support, and, you know, watching an incel who was still asking for help and in pain last week, celebrating his death immediately by doing a big leg kick and going, yes! This felt a bit more doctory, which I liked, him just comforting her about that, and a really lovely kind of insight into, the heart of the Doctor's character, and Belinda as well, because you could see, and just her being a nurse, she has a lot of empathy, and I liked that, she was a bit reluctant to investigate all of this at first, but she really got into it, and she fully committed as well. Once she was like, okay, let's just investigate this, she then didn't complain about it, even when shit was going wrong and she was in danger and everything. She wasn't like, this is your fault, you did this, I just wanted to go home. She didn't kind of use that against him or anything. She just got on with it. She's like, this is our situation, let's get on with it. So I really like that about Belinda. And she's continuing to make a really great impression. I think Verada's doing a great job. Ncuti and Verada looked great in their costumes this episode, so that was also a win. So yeah, learning a bit more about Belinda at the start as well, when she's talking about her parents and the kind of sort of musical background that her father had, and then her mother as well. Just times to just breathe and get to know the characters a bit more in a way I feel like we didn't really get moments like that with Doctor and Ruby, certainly not enough. I do feel like I still don't really know who Ruby is as a person, because she was just solely, her mystery about the mum. And I know some people had those complaints about Clara in Series 7, that she was just her mystery and not really a proper character. But we then did get 2 years to really get to know her. And with Ruby, we had 9 episodes with her, and then she's gone as like a main character. So, I think that was kind of a shame. But I don't think they're repeating those mistakes with Belinda. I feel like we're already getting a better sense of her than we got with 9 episodes with Ruby. Millie Gibson was fantastic last series, but I do think, there wasn't enough there for Ruby as a character. And I feel like they've definitely not gone down that same path with Belinda so far. And I'm enjoying that. So the dynamic between the Doctor and Belinda is really great. Glad to see them kind of come together a bit, really work well as a team. Belinda's just like, okay, I trust you. We'll just do this now. Let's save the world and get this done. And then at the end, she has a nice moment with him. We can work through this together, whatever's coming our way, as the ongoing mystery continues of how to get her home and what's going on the 25th of May, why they keep bouncing off it. Have they tried, going the day before and waiting? Have they tried going up the day after? I would like to see them try those workarounds and be like, okay, that's not working either. I think that would be interesting to see, but I don't know if we will get that. Yeah, the animated sequence I thought was great. I wish it was a bit longer. I'm kind of sad that it wasn't. I almost wish that just wasn't in any of the promotional material for this episode, that they became animated characters, because then it would have just been a nice little surprise sequence. But because we knew that was coming, I then felt like I wanted a bit more from it. But the effects of it was really good. I loved that. I think Ncuti in particular went really exaggerated with his voice when they became cartoon characters, because that's how they would speak in like a cartoon setting. But I like that they both became a bit more exaggerated in their speech when they did that, and then as they got more depth, they kind of just went back and reeled in their performances a bit to be how it normally is. So I thought that was a great bit of acting choices from both of them. So that was really lovely. And yeah, just the idea of giving themselves depth by revealing these secrets to each other and opening up to each other a bit more, showing their vulnerability, was a superpower. And that was great for critics as well, of 15 cries every episode. And I do also criticise that, not the concept of 15 crying, but just that it's every episode, and it did it again in this one, which didn't help that scene that I didn't really like. But the people who are bashing on that for no good reason, because men shouldn't cry, those idiots. I like that vulnerability was how they got out of the situation in that scene. I thought that was really nice. We can't ignore the Doctor Who fancy any longer. So they're trying to get out of the animated sequence. So we shouldn't be going up and down. We need to go through and push ourselves out. So they push themselves out. They're in the living room with these people. God, Doctor Who fans, and they're watching Doctor Who oh my God, it's you, and they've got the Tom Baker stuff. It's the stereotypical basic bitch betrayal of Doctor Who fans. Luckily, they are fictitious. They're not real in this scene, so it's kind of okay. And that's kind of what I talked myself around about. You know, I don't mind them taking the piss out of Doctor Who fans, because Doctor Who fans need the piss taken out of them, because, like, some people need to calm the fuck down. You know, I haven't really enjoyed this era very much. I said my piece on Twitter, which I don't even use Twitter anymore. You know, I kind of said my piece, and then that was that. You know, I gave my opinion, which is fine, and then I just left it at that, and I didn't reply to anyone else saying, well, you're not allowed to enjoy it, you're not allowed to have fun this year. If I didn't enjoy it, you can't enjoy it. That nonsense. But anyway, when that was all, like, happening, I was like, they are not doing this. They are not doing this. They are not, you know, saying, like, oh, the Doctor's going to find out that he's in a TV show. They are not doing that, surely. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And all I could think of, it was going so well. I was like, we're halfway through. I'm loving every second of this. You know, I was like kind of finally clicking with an episode of Doctor Who again. And then, but you know, as it then got revealed, I was like, okay, this is Mr. Ring-a-Ding's plot to kind of keep them trapped here, to try and convince them that they're not real, so they just, like, give up. So what's the point in trying to get out of this if you're not real? It's just all fake in the story. You know, I mean, like, that. It's so hard to kind of get my thoughts across on this scene. I do think, even though I kind of talked myself around by the end of it, I do think this scene was way too long and way too melodramatic, with, like, the music swelling and the Doctor crying over these people sacrificing themselves for him. I'm like, I think in a way there's a sweetness to it, but again, it's that I feel like this era is just a bit smug at times, and I don't like that. And this kind of really felt quite smug to me. The fact that this scene was so long, and it was like, yeah, that's right. I know what Doctor Who fans are like. I know what you're like. I know you have criticisms, but I know better. You're wrong. You know, it's that attitude that I'm like, you're not getting it. You know, people are allowed to criticise. So don't band them all together as, like, these are the only fans who criticise Doctor Who, because that's just not true. But again, I think some people do need to have the piss taken out of them a bit. So, you know, at first I was mortified that they were doing this, but then when it became like, oh, this is part of Mr. Ring-a-Ding's plan, this isn't real, they're the ones who are fake, I was like, okay, fine. And then, yeah, they kind of break out of that. We had Mr. Ring-a-Ding, who kind of like, oh, a Time Lord could give me a body, then I can go outside. And, oh, God, the effect is gross when he becomes like, it's like in SpongeBob when they suddenly, like, do a zoom in on something and it's, like, super realistic and gross. He looked like that when he was kind of becoming, like, a physical being instead of light. And it was horrible in the best way. It looked so good. The effects in this episode were just fantastic. I thought this episode looked great. From start to finish. You know, I didn't spot anything like, oh, that looked a bit dodgy or anything. I feel like this episode was, you know, they poured a lot of money into this episode. I think a lot of the budget for this series probably went into this episode. And yeah, just as he was, like, transforming into, like, this corporeal figure, it was so disgusting and it was so amazing and looked so great as he was, like, just growing and growing and growing. The idea of them, you know, overloading the God of Light with light, so he just becomes, like, this other entity altogether, you know, because the Doctor Who fans in that scene kind of told them how to win the day. You know, kind of like, oh, a bit basic, isn't it? You know, this all leaked online, all that kind of thing. Just saying, like, oh, you know, the solution to this is a bit basic, isn't it? And then telling the Doctor how to win this. Calling it out and saying, well, this is a bit basic, that doesn't alleviate you from the fact that it's still a basic solution. It's that, again, kind of smug writing that just grinds my gears. You know, saying, oh, this is just a copy of another story. Or, you know, if they turned to the camera and went, you know, we've told this story already, but it's still good, right? You know, that doesn't mean you can get away with still just writing the similar story you've already done. It's that kind of thing that this episode does with that Doctor Who fan scene. I'm kind of like, just because you're calling out Doctor Who fans who do this, you know, doesn't mean there aren't fans with legitimate complaints out there, and that feels a bit like, ugh, you know. But fine, it is what it is. But yeah, Mr. Ring-a-Ding gets overloaded with all this light and kind of fades away. I'm not sure if it makes loads of sense for Mr. Ring-a-Ding to, like, create that Doctor Who fan scene and then have them kind of tell the Doctor how to stop him. That feels a bit like you've shot yourself in the foot there, mate. Mr. Ringerding stayed inside because he knows what would happen if he went outside. And he like absorbs all this light and just, vanishes and becomes like everything and everywhere. But he wants to make himself a physical body to go outside. Maybe if he did just get like a fully physical body, it would have been fine to go outside. And because they burst the cinema open and flooded him with light, maybe prematurely, that then happened. I'm guessing that's what that was. But it still does feel like Mr. Ringerding created something that told everyone how to stop him, which was a choice he made. But still. But yeah, I liked the scene of him just growing and growing and growing, and everyone reacting to it outside like, is that Mr. Ringerding? That was really funny. And just seeing him kind of grow and then float away and just kind of become all light. The god of light truly ascended into, a non-corporeal god, and gods that I guess we are, as humans in the real world, more familiar with the concept of, someone a god that we can't see, we can't hear, doesn't physically manifest in any way. It's just kind of everything and everywhere, which I think is quite a nice kind of way of looking at it. The fact that like all the gods in the Doctor Who universe are just evil is quite an interesting take. Are we going to meet a god that's in the pantheon that's just nice and good? Maybe not. Maybe that's not as interesting, but interesting kind of, I guess. There is a subtext there, maybe. But yeah, I thought that was a fun kind of solution, and everything with the guy who like stayed in the cinema. How do you like leave there, sir? Like, what have you been eating? Like, do I want to know what you've been eating? I guess a lot of popcorn. Damn. What a dream. What a dream that would be, to just eat popcorn for like 3 months. But yeah, everything with him and his wife I thought was really sad, that Mr. Ringerding kind of manipulates him into keep feeding him. Clearly feeding him not much, because he was saying, he was massive when he first arrived and now he's like not 2 feet tall or something. But manipulating him by like bringing his dead wife alive from like footage of her he had. That was really sad, and I liked the imagery of her in like in black and white. It felt very WandaVision when they were like dancing together, and then she fades and like she becomes like into colour. And then I guess the image of her, it was too real in the end, because she kind of like aided him to, and convinced him to help out and save the day. Did he die? I felt like he was just stood outside the door and then it like properly exploded and like kaboom. So that is, people complained in the last era when someone would just take the sacrifice away from the Doctor or the companion and like sacrifice themselves. People complained about that guy in Flux. No, not Flux. At the end of The Timeless Children, that old guy. So I think people are going to be surprisingly silent about that this time around, because it's not the Chibnall era, but there you go. That kind of wrap up and how they dealt with Mr. Ringerding was, good fun, and a nice kind of tying of the bow to that whole thing. So that was cool. I liked him, the imagery of him fading away. And again, Alan Cumming was fantastic. Come back and voice a character anytime, pal. You were great. So yeah, that was really good. And, the Doctor and Belinda, off they go. With a bit more of an understanding, certainly on Belinda's part, I guess, of understanding a bit more about the Doctor. And they're going to continue trying to get Belinda home, I guess. And we'll see what happens with that. But I did like the kind of natural setup that led them to this setting and led the Doctor to opening up a bit more about Belinda, about his past with Gallifrey and everything like that. It's already just so much more organic, this exposition of Belinda finding these things out about the Doctor. She's not just getting info dumped in episode 1 like Space Babies did. Just as episodes are going on, she's learning a few more things about him, and I think it's been written much more organically, and I'm really liking that. And then as they take off, we have Mrs. Flood. God, this woman's everywhere. I mean, I feel like we're in danger of this until the finale. It's just becoming like, oh, we've seen this old lady before. She's had a cameo in every episode, and it at the moment it's just going to be like, we're just doing Susan Twist again, aren't we? Until they reveal who Mrs. Flood is. So I think it's in danger of being quite samey in terms of like, there's the old woman in this week's episode. There's her cameo. It's in danger of just being that again, like they did last series. But obviously it's going to come to a different conclusion. So we'll see where that goes, I guess. I did like her line though. It was like, trick of the light. So again, kind of, she was being meta within the context of the episode there, rather than the context of this is a TV show. I'm going to stare down the lens of the camera and go, trick of the light. See you next week. And that's, I think, something a bit more tolerable for me. All this looking into the camera and the self-referential stuff, I've never enjoyed it. They tried to they did a tongue-in-cheek reference in Remembrance of the Daleks, the Seventh Doctor story, about like Doctor Who being a TV show, because it was like it cut away when a TV show, because it was set on the day Doctor Who started, and it was like, and now we have a new sci-fi show on the BBC, Doctor Who, and then like the TV cuts off, they cut away from it or something, and that's just like a quick jokey thing. Again, I don't really like it, but a quick cutaway thing. And now we get this, where they have a whole ass scene with Doctor Who fans, and so yeah, I was quite glad that they kind of spun it so that the fans were the ones that were fake, and this was just sort of like a trap for them, and like we're going to sacrifice ourselves so you can carry on now. Bye, we love you, Doc. But then they had to go and ruin that, and I justified it to myself in my head. I was like, the scene's too long, but I can understand that it was within the context of the episode that it works. But then they had to do that last scene where the credits roll, and then it cuts to them watching the episode and like, we're still here, yay! I'm like, you've killed it. You've completely undermined the point of that now. Like, it's just, now I hate it again. So it's like, it was going so well. So that was quite frustrating. And again, people are going to love that. And I do think they've got to be going somewhere with this Mrs. Flood thing and her breaking the fourth wall, even though she didn't this time. Because it's not just Mrs. Flood. I feel like they've retroactively pretended that the Doctor and Maestro didn't also break the fourth wall in the Devil's Cord. Now they're just making it all about Mrs. Flood's the only one doing it. I'm hoping if they go somewhere with this, and it's like there is an in-universe reason that people are breaking the fourth wall suddenly, and Mrs. Flood is breaking the fourth wall all the time. If they are explaining that, if she's the god of fourth walls or something, and they're like, this is why in universe, since Russell T Davies came back, this is why there's a bit more self-referential stuff and breaking the fourth wall. And it's not like Doctor Who's never broken the fourth wall. We had Peter Capaldi talk to the camera at the start of Before the Flood, and the end of that episode he's like looking into the camera like, oh hey, and I don't like it then either. As much as I love that story, that's the one thing about it I don't like. So we do have all that stuff. If they explain that and it's like, this is why that's been happening, fine. I'm retroactively fine with doing stuff like this. But if they don't, and it is just I know what Doctor Who fans are like, I'm great, even though there are people with genuinely sound complaints about the show out there. If that doesn't get explained in a way, then I'm not on board with it. I think it's just a bit I think it cheapens the show and makes it seem it makes itself look a bit too clever. I know some people had complaints with the Moffat era, being like, it references itself all the time and it thinks it's being so clever. I'm like, this is 10 times worse than that. I don't like that aspect of this era at all. If they explain it, fine. I may not still like it, because it's just not my cup of tea. Shows like referencing themselves and breaking the fourth wall like that. But if there is like an in-universe reason that it's happening, fine. You do you. But if it's just like this is just what happens now, which is the explanation that Russell gave when this first started happening, then I'm not on board with that. But overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I was a bit frustrated that, that scene with the fans happened. And I mean, again, I don't mind it happening with the context of the story of Mr. Ring-a-Ding, but I do think it took up way too much time. This episode was like 43 minutes with credits, and like we could have dedicated this to maybe seeing a bit more of Mr. Ring-a-Ding than having this and having, us congratulate ourselves for Doctor Who being much better than its fans. Hooray, aren't we great? But yeah, that was Lux. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was great. I loved the setting of this episode. I thought Mr. Ring-a-Ding's probably the best antagonist of this era so far. I really, really enjoyed him. Alan Cumming was great. I thought this episode looked amazing. I thought there was some nice kind of character beats, like in the diner scene and Belinda and the Doctor giving themselves depth. So they really did kind of make the most of this premise, I think, for the most part. And yeah, it's really just that one scene with the fans going on a bit too long and, you know, just being a bit too smug for my taste on behalf of the show towards its audience. That kind of stopped it from being like, 5 stars, we're so back, this is the best episode in years. For me, you know, that kind of killed my enjoyment of it, but I was absolutely loving it before then, and I loved the stuff after that as well. But yeah, I do think this is a standout episode of this era, and I am very intrigued for what next episode is going to be. I think it's called The Well. It looks like a bit of a creepy one. And yeah, I think that's everything I kind of have to say about Lux. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. I still really liked it, even though, you know, I had one glaring issue with it. But honestly, the rest of the episode was fantastic. And I wish and hope that we get more Doctor Who of this quality going forward. You know, I do want Doctor Who to just feel like a Doctor Who episode again. It's not trying to do something different and crazy. And I thought we were getting that with this one. We ultimately didn't, which is a shame. But, you know, those moments still were fantastic. So, yeah, I'm excited to carry on with this series from The Well next week. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts on it below. Yeah, I will see you when I see you.